It's Carl with Big Hat Racing. We're going to go over some of the modifications necessary to put a 2018 Coyote into an SN95. First thing, you want to get an aftermarket K-member. This is a QA1 K-member. This also fits Fox bodies. But for the search, or for the modifications that we're doing, a California carb legal, we have to use cats. And I'm going to show you why we had to make this cut here. That's to clear the cat. We also had to make a trim this off for the same reason, the cat. And we also welded on a tab here because we eliminated a bolt hole right here. So let me show you why this is necessary. This is the 2018 Coyote exhaust manifold, and we had to reorient the cat. We left it in the same position. We just sort of pie cutted it and moved it in. And here's why this is necessary. Because if you look at the clearance here, that's about where it goes, right there. And you can see the clearance issue, and also what it was hitting down here in the car. So you're going to cut that. There's several ways to do it. We put a gusset in here with a piece of 5/16 metal and welded it in, since we took some of the metal out over here. And now it fits. There's plenty of clearance. And we'll show you later how this fits up in the car. So the other modification we had to do here, obviously the Stifler's K-member, we'll talk about that later. So let's go over and talk about what we had to do to the clutch. This is a T82 or MT82, has a hydraulic clutch versus the old cable clutches. We don't want to retain that. So with this build, we acquired the pedal assembly and the sleigh cylinder for the hydraulic clutch. And for those of you Fox body and SN95 folks, you know this was operated by a cable assembly which used to go right in here. And what we did, we cut down the pedal from the from the 2018 Coyote GT that we got with when we purchased the motor. This is a little sleigh cylinder, and we made a little bracket here, and basically moved. You can see how this actuates perfectly, and there's plenty of room over here because there used to be a big giant cable assembly here. Now you can buy a conversion here from several different places. They're $500 to $700. We got this pedal with the car and a little bit of fab welding and a bracket, probably 2 hours of work, and we've got our clutch. Now what's different is this, come around here, this is our firewall. So the clutch line is gonna exit the firewall versus up here, down here. And the steering is about right here. We'll show you later where this will come through the firewall, but we think this is going to work just great. It's nice and compact. It's already mated to the MT82, so we expect all that to work wonderfully. And we just made a little tab over here to stop the clutch. That's just a welded tab. And we got plenty of adjustment if we need to do any adjustment. So that's it on the clutch conversion.
Rick here at Big Hat Racing. So I want to talk to you about exhaust today, really cats. This is the stock 2018 GT Gen 3 exhaust manifold and stock cat. So you see what we had to do right here.
We needed to open up a little bit of clearance here. This is right basically under where the gas pedal is. So started out using the small hammer, ended up using the bigger hammer in order to get a nice, clear, even shot on this to get that clearance. Now on the other side, over here, because we rotated the position of the cat, no change relative to the manifold other than just rotated it in a little bit, all that was necessary was a little dent right there.
This one needed quite a bit more work, and I'll show it to you. First, I'll show you the position where this has to sit. It comes in about here, and I'll show you what has to happen next to make that fit. Right here we had to cut the K-member mounting bracket, and as you see on the driver's side you have two holes this way, and put a nutsert longitudinally right here. So trim that wing off, change the bolt here, and we're back in business.
All right, guys, so one of the other critical phases of the process for getting the Coyote engine and the MT82 trans in is a little bit of surgery, or as some people refer to it, the marine haircut on the tunnel. Now, just to give you a little orientation here, in the normal center stack, you would have the radio and the head unit, and there is the amplifier unit for the Mach 460, which sat there, and then above that, this is the restraint control module. It's the thing that causes the restraints to tighten when there's an accident. This will be going back in, so we avoid throwing codes on the body module of the SN95. So with those out of the way, we were able to position one of the 5 times we've had the engine and trans in and out to get the trans located in the tunnel and figure out the height. Now, our cut here is a little more aggressive maybe than absolutely necessary, but it made sure that we're able to position the transmission so that it's pointing directly at the rear end. Remember, this is an IRS type car, so it's important to have a direct shot from the transmission to the IRS. We'll use shims on the IRS to adjust pinion angle, but that'll come more detail in another video. So in the meantime, we're creating a piece that will fill this panel in, and you can see the little dots here that are giving us an indication of where all the spot welds are going to be. So we'll spot weld that piece back in and then seam seal it so it seals up the space once again. These are the no longer used transmission mount brackets because we've installed the stiflers, which I'll come to again in a minute. The other thing we did here for tunnel clearance is really more about safety. And so what we've done, you're going to see a lot of little zings here around the engine compartment. Everywhere we could find leftovers from the Ford factory spot welds, we've zinged these off so we're not constantly cutting our hands. The big issue for engine clearance is seen right up here at the top. So as you can see, we have completely trimmed back that large pinch weld that's at the top of the firewall there. And instead we have filled that with a little bit of 1/8" steel rod, because as you cut it smooth, it creates some larger and smaller gaps. That will get finish welded, smooth. Everything will then be painted. So we'll have a beautiful firewall again that fully clears the variable cam actuators on the 2018 Cobra engine. So those are some details about what's required to fit the transmission to the tunnel and what's required to get the engine to clear the firewall for this Coyote Cobra transplant. So we mentioned earlier about after our marine haircut in the transmission tunnel that we were fabricating a piece that will be the patch piece. Just going to tuck up into the tunnel like this. There'll obviously be a little bit of cutting and pasting. The gap you see at the back of the tunnel is where we'll install a separate plate for the shifter boot. Because we're using the special shifter that we purchased, which we'll show in another episode, that will allow us to have this come up basically exactly to the same hole as the original shifter did here in the SN95 Cobra.
Okay, we're ready to tack weld in our patch and height extender for the transmission tunnel. We made this out of 16 gauge or 18 gauge, I'm not sure. And we bent it, and we've actually added about 1.5 inches of height here to the tunnel, which should clear the MT82. We've punched some holes here and ground everything down. So we're gonna spot weld this just like the factory would, and then we're gonna seam seal it, paint it all up, and by the time we're done, you're not gonna know any difference. So we'll just spot weld and keep pushing these things in with a pipe. This will be a 2-person job. You see we've got this all fitted to the contour of the floor and the firewall, and so we think it'll be just fine and accomplish the goal, which is to create clearance for the MT82 transmission.
Okay guys, the next thing I'm going to talk about is easily the best blingy part we have so far on our MT82 conversion. So this is the MGW shifter made specifically for this MT82 conversion with the 2018 Cobra engine that's going in our SN95 chassis, the Coyote Cobra project. So I'm not going to give you the entire discussion of the install. There's a great video on the MGW site that goes through all the steps involved in getting this just right. So I have pre-assembled this piece of the arm with these two Allen bolts onto the main shifter body. I'm going to slide the cup with the Teflon cup over the ball that is the activator for the shifter itself, just to kind of give you a sense of how everything is positioned. So up at the top here, there is this bolt that replicates the same bolt that's used in the remote shifter on the stock MT82 installation in a 2018. And you can see as I let this down, let's move forward a little bit. What makes this so impressive is these arms make use of these steel boss inserts on the side of the MT82. These are used for precision machining of the transmission when it's being built at the factory. So what they do is create this arm here, and then these bolts, which you can see are very precisely machined, screw into the side. Now, you can see the angle these come up and the way they work. This is what part of the reason why we had to carefully trim our marine haircut, if you will, on the tunnel so that we could clear these reinforcing arms for the shifter. So now I'm not tightening any of these down or tightening these where these brilliantly made arms tighten on to these machine bolt structures. But this assembly, there's a beautiful, as I mentioned, 5-minute video that covers all of that for the S550 MT82. And all these go into place so you can see this is an extraordinarily positive acting shifter. I don't even have this all bolted down. You can see how precise this mechanism is. And that's the MGW S550 shifter. So you remember a little bit ago and earlier in the video we talked about that we're no longer going to be using the original SN95 mounts. What we're using instead is the Stifler's transmission mount. Now one of the great things about this is they have planned this out so well that it actually bolted to existing holes that are already drilled through the frame. The Stifler's mounts are well made, have a powder coat. On the other side here, there's a stiffening plate with nuts and everything to go to that. And again, these are holes that are already there in the SN95 chassis, so it made the initial location really simple. Similarly, you see the same thing on the other side. Now you'll note that this mount is slotted, and you can see that. Originally, the mount here on the other side was not slotted. We found that we needed to add via a die grinder to slot that a little bit so we could get the precise positioning in the chassis that we were looking for. So now I'm going to walk over and I'm going to show you the actual Stifler's mount here on the engine and trans as it sits out of the car. So this is the complete Stifler's mount in all of its glory. Again, nicely welded, put together piece, powder coated finish. You'll notice that there are these spacers here. This can be assembled, so depending upon where you're locating the engine in the car, front to back, you move the spacers to adjust for that. We found that with both spacers on this end, we ended up with it back because, as you've seen, we're putting the engine as far back in the chassis as possible in order to get the best weight balance. So Stifler's transmission mount also comes with this bracket that goes into these 3 bolts that are part of the factory MT82. And then it has this slotted plate. So depending upon your left to right adjustments, you have one of 3 locations. And then this, along with these polyurethane spacers here, determines the rear height of the transmission. So we determined that to get it square, as I mentioned, we had to do a little bit of an additional slot in the one side mount on the driver's side. And then we can see, as you can see, this is adjusted so that the slots are all the way to the height. And we'll be making a final adjustment on the height so that, as mentioned before, this will point directly get the drive shaft up as high in the tunnel as possible, which also means we're getting the engine as high up in the tunnel as possible. So we have clearance for the variable cam timing actuators against that firewall. That's where we had to trim that piece of material that we looked at earlier, that pinch weld that goes right across here. But that has allowed us to get the engine in and out directly. No monkey business, didn't have to take the intake off as many people talk about. And so the next time this goes up, we'll be bringing it up with the Stifler's mount, with the MGW shifter. Everything will go in place, and because we've done the 5 pre-fits on this, it's just going to drop right into place as we use our lift to ease the engine and everything down. And this will be the last time we take the engine and transmission out of the car. One last note on this. You might notice that I'm wearing a JEGS hat. JEGS has been an important partner for us in this process. We have sourced a lot of the miscellaneous parts and other things through JEGS. They've been a wonderful partner in this build with us. And our hats off to Zach Carrico and the rest of the guys at the JEGS team for really supporting us and making this the easy and great build that it's become.